At the beginning of the 20th century, in the United States, there lived a man who seemed to possess an impossible gift. He could diagnose illnesses without ever seeing his patients, recommend treatments he could not possibly have known, and speak about events far removed in time while in a state of trance. For over 40 years, hundreds of people sat beside a bed, watching that man lying still, his eyes closed, waiting for him to begin speaking. And when it happened, what he said seemed to defy every explanation. His name was Edgar Cayce. For years, he would do something that, even today, no one has been able to explain. But it all began with an event that would completely change his life. Edgar Cayce was born in 1877 in Kentucky, a rural region of fields, farms, and small communities. His family was simple and deeply religious. From an early age, Edgar grew up immersed in faith. He was a quiet boy, introverted. He spent much of his time reading the Bible, reflecting, sitting in silence. According to some accounts from his childhood, however, something unusual seemed to accompany him from a very young age. At times, he claimed to see presences, luminous figures, angels. To his family, they were nothing more than childish fantasies, nothing more. Life went on as usual. As he grew older, Edgar did not become a scholar. He did not study medicine. He received no scientific training. He found work as a photographer, a simple profession. He spent his days with clients, portraits, and developing photographs. For years, he seemed destined to live a completely ordinary life, until something happened that changed everything. One day, Edgar Cayce suddenly lost his voice. At first, he thought it was just a cold, a temporary problem. But days passed, then weeks, and his voice did not return. Doctors tried to understand what was happening. They attempted various treatments, but none of them could find a convincing explanation. For someone who worked closely with people, losing his voice was devastating. Edgar feared he might never be able to work again. That was when someone proposed a rather unusual solution: hypnosis. A man named Al Lane, interested in hypnotism, decided to attempt an experiment. Cayce was placed into a hypnotic state, and while in that condition, something unexpected happened. He began to speak, but he did not speak incoherently. He described with precision what was happening inside his body. He spoke of contracted muscles, of blood circulation, of physiological processes he had never studied. Then he suggested a treatment. When the session ended, Edgar woke up, and he remembered nothing of what he had said. But the treatment given during the trance was applied, and it worked. His voice returned completely. What might have seemed like a curious incident soon became something much greater. Lane decided to try again. This time, the question concerned another person, a distant patient, someone Cayce had never met. Edgar entered that state of trance once more. Someone spoke the patient's name, and while in that condition, he began to speak. He described that person's body, the organs, the illness affecting them. Then he suggested a cure. When the patient followed those instructions, their condition improved. At first, many believed it was nothing more than coincidence. But as time passed, the cases continued to increase, and explanations became more and more difficult. Word slowly began to spread. More and more people wanted to meet Edgar Cayce. Over time, Cayce learned to enter that state on his own. He would lie down, close his eyes, fold his hands over his chest, and within moments, he would enter a sleep-like condition, a deep state of trance. From there, his readings would begin. As the years passed, Cayce performed thousands of readings. People from all over the United States came to him for help. Many claimed his diagnoses were incredibly accurate. Some doctors became interested in the phenomenon. Others remained deeply skeptical. But over time, the questions asked of Cayce began to change. They were no longer only about health. People began asking something much greater. Questions about the mind, the soul, the destiny of humanity. And it was during some of these readings that Edgar Cayce began to speak of something even more extraordinary. Something that went far beyond medicine. He did not speak only of illness. He did not speak only of the present. He began to speak of the past lives of the people before him. According to Cayce, human existence would not be limited to a single lifetime, but would instead be part of a much longer journey. A path made of many experiences across different eras. During some readings, Cayce described what he called the history of the soul of an individual. Lives lived in other times, in other places, sometimes even in lost civilizations. On some occasions, he claimed that certain individuals in the room had lived previous lives in the ancient civilization of Atlantis. According to Cayce, past lives could influence the present. Talents, fears, relationships, even certain illnesses. Many listened to these statements with disbelief. Others were deeply fascinated. Because if these words were true, the history of humanity would be far more complex than we imagine. Over the course of his life, Edgar Cayce gave more than 14,000 readings, all transcribed, all preserved. And despite his growing fame, he continued to insist on one thing. When he emerged from that state of trance, he remembered absolutely nothing. Edgar Cayce died in 1945, but the mystery surrounding him did not disappear with him. Even today, scholars and researchers continue to study his readings. Some believe he was an extraordinary clairvoyant. Others think his case may reveal aspects of the human mind we still do not understand. I am Armil. I observe the world, and I tell the stories that seem to defy explanation. If you enjoyed this journey, you can support the channel with a like and subscribe so you don't miss the next stories. But one question still remains unanswered. When Edgar Cayce entered that state of trance, where did that information really come from? Could it be that the limits of the human mind have yet to be truly understood by science?